So I'm excited today to introduce 2009 Flinn Scholar Nesima Aberra. Nesima is a seasoned writer and strategist driven by a deep commitment to social impact. And I'm really looking forward to hearing more about her background and her professional journey that's led her to her current role as Vice President of Change Consulting, where she manages their digital and content teams. So we'll start off with a little bit of background. Nesima, I'm hoping that you can share with us a bit about what it was like growing up in Chandler and how your family story has shaped your journey.
Well, thanks, Anne, for inviting me, and thanks, everyone. I see some familiar faces, so this is awesome as a way to reconnect. Yeah, so I grew up in the Chandler area. I have a younger brother. My parents are originally from Eritrea, so growing up as like a first generation, like daughter of the diaspora, this idea of being really knowledgeable or like caring about like what's happening in the world was always really important to me. And so even though I wasn't in a state that necessarily reflected my parents' like heritage and culture, I was always deeply interested in exploring that as a part of my identity. And I was always like a writer, and I don't know where that came from because nobody in my family writes. But I loved writing and reading, and so I knew that I wanted to find some way to merge those passions. And so I was always writing like fiction and poetry and all kinds of creative writing. And then in high school, there was no like outlet for like creative writing, but we had a newspaper. And so I ended up joining that, and that kind of led me into journalism. As I entered like my senior year, I was able to be the editor in chief, and so I began thinking about um, the role of journalism and being able to like inform and engage and educate people and see that as like a tool for social change. And in Eritrea, where my family's from, media, like press freedom, is like non-existent. So it also felt really resonant for me to explore that as a path. A lot of people didn't even know where the country Eritrea was from. And I realized that was because they purposefully do not want journalists covering what's happening in the country. I think I need to check if it's still accurate, but they have been pretty much consistently number one ranked with like the most jailed journalists and their treatment of media worldwide. And so that just kind of like lit a fire under me to see that like journalism and writing and storytelling is very important for people to not just understand themselves, but understand those around them and also inspire them to act. And so that's what I ended up deciding to major in college. So I went to ASU and I was at their Walter Cronkite School for Journalism. So it was great that I had the opportunity to like stay in state with the support of the Flinn Scholarship. And so that's kind of like how I went down that path of exploring, yeah, like what I wanted to do in the world. It became more complicated after that, but that is how I got there. So maybe I'll just stop there for now.
Oh, great. Well, can you tell us about being a high school student at Hamilton and deciding to apply for the Flinn Scholarship?
Yeah, it's interesting because my family moved right before I think I was in seventh grade. And so I was not familiar at all with the district that I was then going to go into, including Hamilton. And so I was really nervous to go there. Like I hardly knew anyone there. So it was basically a fresh start. But I think by leaning into my interests, and Hamilton had a lot of really great opportunities. They had speech and debate, they had, the high school newspaper. So there was a lot of ways that I was able to like follow my passions and become really engaged and meet friends and explore what it is that I wanted to do. And I think I think it was like an info session that might have been given. And my counselor just recommended that I stop in because I really didn't think about like I knew I was going to go to college. I don't know what I thought was going to happen or like how I thought I was going to finance it. But I figured like, oh, I liked the way the Flynn talked about what it was funding and resourcing. Like it wasn't just money, but it felt like it was like this really inspiring like call to action and like mission. And that's like what I was really into. So I think I was interested in it, not necessarily just because of the financial aspect, but because I was like, oh, like they're really gonna like help you figure out who you want to be and support your passions. And when I saw that they have money for like travel, right, and that really sparked my interest too. And I didn't know anyone who had done the Flinn Scholarship. I don't even think we had Flinn Scholars from Hamilton at the time. I think we've started um, a good pacing of Flinn Scholars after me. But yeah, it felt like a shot in the dark, but something in me just told me to just apply and see what happens.
That's great. Well, so you go to ASU. Can you share a little bit with us about what you studied and how you came to pursue those majors?
Yeah, so I chose to continue like my interest in journalism and go to the Cronkite School. So I declared my initial major as journalism. Halfway through, my career, my academic counselor was like, "So you have enough credits like from AP and like dual enrollment to like graduate early. Like, are you trying to do that, or like do you want to like study anything else?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't think I want to graduate early. I don't know what I want to do yet." So I realized that for journalism, just studying journalism is not really enough. Like that's just like the tools, but you need to have some kind of like issue area, like something that you're an expert on. So I decided to pursue global studies. Um, and there was a Flynn in my year, Galen, who was also in the global studies program. I hardly saw him because he was always traveling. So when I did see him on campus, like we would chat about being a global studies major. And so I felt like that was the right major for me because I was like, yeah, I'm interested in international issues. I want to learn more about the world, figure out my role in it, see if maybe I would write about international issues or international affairs. And so ended up declaring a double major. And then I took a class. I think I went to an event that was held by the Center for the Study of Religion and Conflict. And I was really interested in the way they were exploring, yeah, just all of these different social issues and like how religion played a role. And I'm Muslim, and right before college, I decided to start wearing the hijab, and that was like a huge shift for me in exploring like what that meant to be visibly Muslim, and then be in media and be in all these different spaces where you're often talked about. And so I realized that like in a way that I did not plan to, I became like a very like I don't know, I stood out in a way that I didn't plan to. And I realized like I wanted a way to grapple with those issues because I felt like people are going to expect that. Like they're going to expect you to be super knowledgeable and like know all these things. And so I was really inspired to explore this center at ASU. And I ended up declaring a certificate through the Center for the Study of Religion and Conflict, which was a really fantastic program. And I don't know if that many people have heard of it, but highly recommend. They have so many really great programs and events that they have for the community. So really loved that group. For yeah, just giving me a space to navigate all of those different issues together.
Right. Will you tell us a bit about your decision to study abroad in Guatemala?
Yeah. So my interest area in global studies was specifically about human rights and conflict and refugee issues. And so I was really interested in East Africa since that's where my parents are from. However, there are very few opportunities to study abroad in those countries for many reasons. And so I realized my best language is Spanish. And so to probably find better study abroad opportunities, I was like, I think I need to look at Spanish speaking countries. And I was really interested through one of my global studies classes in social entrepreneurship because I was looking at like development and like all of the other consequences that come from the aid industry, which we're seeing right now with USAID being disintegrated. So at the time, I knew that there was something in there that I wanted to explore about like what were the other options of like ethical ways of supporting development. And I found a social entrepreneurship program in Guatemala that I was able to go to for a summer. And so it was definitely very unexpected, but it kind of had to fit some of the requirements that I needed to meet. And I loved it. Like Guatemala was such a fantastic country. Everyone I met was so sweet. I also got to like learn and practice my Spanish while I was there. So definitely a place I have not gone back since I went, but I would really, really love to. So that was just like an amazing experience on top of the usual Flynn seminar that we all got to go to Hungary and Romania.
Thinking back on your experience, I'm curious if you have any advice about, pursuing a summer, a semester, or even a year abroad, just knowing what you know now.
Yeah. If knowing what I know now, I really wish I had gone abroad for a whole semester or year. Especially like realizing like I had plenty of credits that I essentially like I could have just done whatever I wanted, but I was such a like yeah, I was just such a serious overachieving nerd at the time, and I just was so worried about like going off on my like my program or like falling behind. And I was also had FOMO about like not being on campus and being in the community that I was part of. But in hindsight, I was like, that is like a once in a lifetime opportunity. Like you could have definitely at least done a semester abroad. But I think my advice is I think language skills are really important if you really want to do like deeper work. I think if you're at a school, I didn't have that experience. I didn't study. I was doing like an internship program. It might be different, but I would definitely highly recommend like if you're pursuing a language to really use that as an opportunity. Because that's what I got out of being in Guatemala. I was able to actually practice speaking in an immersive setting, which otherwise I didn't really get to do. And then I say like just be creative about what kind of options you could have. I just was Googling my program, and I think I use the ASU's like Innovation Center. They have a lot of programs there. So just try and see like what are the combinations of opportunities that you can pursue. And if you have the time, definitely try and do more than one.
Well, I appreciate that advice for the current scholars who are either on right now or will hear this later. I agree that if you can commit to a full semester, it's a different level of experience. And I think our scholars still feel, pressure to finish, and to be on top of things and to not be away from school for very long. So I appreciate you sharing that perspective.
Yeah, my brother was not super into study abroad. I think he did like a winter break experience, which I just could not understand why he like he was an engineering student. I guess they didn't have as many relevant study abroads. And so he just did a 2 week thing. And I'm like, what are you doing? But yeah, everyone has whatever works best for them.
Indeed, indeed. Well, so shifting from ASU, will you talk us through your decision on what you chose to do after graduating from ASU?
Yeah. So journalism, it was an interesting time to be studying journalism when I did. It was at the time when they started to be really pessimistic about where the industry was heading. Social media was just emerging. I signed up for Twitter as like a homework assignment. Like that was the era that I was on. Um, I was also really grappling with the idea of objectivity in journalism, which is something that the industry is still going through today. Because I had a heart in like service and human rights and advocacy, and yet here I was trying to commit to journalism as my field. And I realized through a lot of my classes and studying ethics and just the job market, I was like, the kind of journalism you want to do, I don't know if you're going to be able to do it. Like it felt like I was trying to fit myself into a box that didn't quite fit. And so I started to really panic about what that meant because here I was committing to this field and going through the training to be a journalist. And yet I was worried that like I was not going to be fulfilled with the lifestyle because of what it required of you. Like you can't share your opinions. You have to really be mindful of what you're involved in your associations because it affects people's perception of you and bias. And so I was concerned that maybe journalism would not necessarily be the best route for me to create the change that I wanted. And so I started to also take some strategic communications and PR classes because a couple of my friends were like, like you can transfer those skills in a different way and like help particular causes or issues using your journalistic skills. And so I was like, oh, we were taught that PR was the dark side. But I said, you know what? Let me just be better equipped because they're also telling us we're not going to find jobs. So why not? You had to be trained in everything. Like we had to shoot video, we had to be able to make, code websites. Like it was a very crazy time to study journalism. But I was really grateful for that like push to just be prepared for the whatever could happen. And so I remember stepping back into ASU's Innovation Center where they had like Teach for America and like Peace Corps. Like it was just one of those things where you're like, what should I do with my life after this? And someone recommended doing a fellowship. They're like, it's like very low stakes. You do it for a year, you just try something out. and go from there. Because I was also like, do I want to go to law school? Like everyone, like they're like, should I just go to law school? And so I ended up doing a fellowship in social entrepreneurship, which, I had an experience in Guatemala, but this time I did it in San Francisco, which I appreciated because I also wanted to still be like within the context of like the US, and feel less like I was coming in as an American trying to, save another country. And I got to be a communications associate on a nonprofit. So I was able to like use my journalism background, work at an organization and help them with their storytelling strategy, to reach their donors, reach their audience. So that was the first initial step. I was just like literally trying to figure out what to do after graduation. And so I said, I'll just do this fellowship and see what happens. And it ended up being really amazing. And I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't done that.
Will you share a bit more about what you learned about both yourself and your interests through that fellowship experience?
Yeah, I realized that where I work best is being at the intersection of like storytelling and social impact. I realized that I didn't quite fit into the role of a journalist traditionally, but I also was not a traditional advocate that was going to like be on the ground with people and organizing in that same way. Um, and so I was like in the middle where I was like, I'm going to use my storytelling skills, for these causes. So like there's a role that I can play because I think it gets overwhelming when you're like, I want to be a part of change. And it's like, okay, well, what exactly are you doing? Like there are some people who are meant to be like on the streets. There's some people who are like the numbers people, some people who are like the healers or the teachers. And I was like, I think my offering is my writing and my words. And so however that can be used for positive impact. That's what I realized through that experience, that it was possible. I wasn't sure if it was. I wasn't sure if I was like making something up. But that is where I am now. Like I'm working at a social impact focused communications agency. So like I would have never thought like over a decade ago that like, oh, that's going to be a job that you can even have. Like you're going to have to pick between being a journalist or an activist. And now I get to live at the intersection of those with people who are also writers, creatives. A lot of them come from the journalism world, who've now decided to like shift those skills toward helping organizations and clients. So yeah, it's sometimes you just don't know where you're going to end up. So I'm really happy that I just stuck to it.
Good reminder. Can you tell us how you ended up in DC?
Yeah, so I decided after my time in the Bay that I wanted to continue my studies. And so I applied to grad school and ended up deciding to go to American University in DC. And I thought DC would be, as much as I love the Bay, would be a better place and a better fit for it being like the heart of like media, international affairs, public policy. So that's why I was drawn to coming here. Um, and so yeah, did my program. It was for 2 years and it was great because I was still dancing between journalism and communication. So I still did internships in both, because that's just how I was. I was like, I really want to make sure I know what I'm doing. So I did an internship at a communications agency that was focused on mission driven and policy work. And then I did an internship with Vox, and I always have to spell it out so people know which one I'm saying, but it's VOX. At the time, a lot of people didn't know about it. So I did an internship with them and also did like research at the Center for Media and Social Impact, which again was so crazy that American University even had that. So that was one of the reasons I was like, oh, I want to go there because they're studying how media can influence social impact. So that's what brought me here, and that was in 2015. And then I stayed for the first two jobs I had after grad school. One was at a sadly just closed investigative newsroom called the Center for Public Integrity. And then after that, I went to the Atlantic. And so what I did at both of those newsrooms was work in their audience engagement departments, which a lot of people don't know about, but they're basically like the community journalists of a newsroom. So they help the work that the reporters publish actually engage and have impact and measure the impact of that work. So I loved that because it felt like another way that I was like in the intersection of like what journalism could do and like really helping people remember that journalism is a public service. It's not just all about clicks and views. So I loved that because I was never driven by clicks and views. I was really driven by this story actually doing something for people and the feedback cycle of like readers being able to tell journalists, here's what I want, here's what I need. Can you help us? You know, we have an issue, we have something that we don't understand. Like, what can you all do? So that was really great to be a part of that at the Center for Public Integrity. And then moving to the Atlantic was not expected for me, but I was just really excited about being at a magazine that has a really long history of publishing really great essays and like long form journalism and features. And so I just thought that was a great experience for me to also, yeah, just be around really cool, smart people. And so I was there at both of those places for about 2 years each.
So, from many people's perspective, as a journalist, getting a job at the Atlantic is, kind of a dream job. So I'm curious if you can share just a bit more about your role there and what you enjoyed most about working at the Atlantic, and then why
Yeah,
you chose to leave, maybe.
yeah, definitely. So yeah, the Atlantic was definitely a big step for me. It was definitely a place where people would respond to my emails, which was lovely. As soon as they see that in your email. And so yeah, I think just getting to be a part of a really like ambitious collaborative team was really inspiring, and I felt like I needed that. Because my previous role, I was in a place that was tended to lean older and was a little bit risk averse, which is one of the reasons why, unfortunately, it did not like keep up with the times and the needs of readers today. And so I wanted the opposite experience. I wanted a place where it was a little bit more nimble. And the audience team had me be very active on social media. I was really interested in like, how do you get people to read and connect with your work? And so I basically grew their Instagram page, which it was not really used before that. So I feel like my claim to fame was like helping them reach like like over 200% growth in their audience on Instagram. I also helped with their website, testing out headlines, which I didn't realize newsrooms did, but they are constantly improving and changing their headlines and the placement of stories to make sure that people read particular things and track that. And so it was really interesting being at a company that was driven by those types of metrics because, yeah, you just don't realize all the ways out the algorithm is a part of your experience of navigating the news. And so that was really important for me as someone who wanted to be an informed news consumer, but also wanted to then inform the news that people get. Um, and so, yeah, so my team was very crazy. We had really crazy shifts, but we worked together to do that because we were basically there from the morning till the evening, making sure we knew the stories that were coming in the morning and at the end of the day, joining like the afternoon editorial meetings. So the pacing of it was really intense for me. So it definitely helped me realize that like the daily news grind does not work well for me in that
Right.
way. But I loved the like what I learned and what I took away from it, and everyone was just really really great to work with. And so I think if you have an opportunity to join a company like that, even if it's like painful for a little bit, I think it's a good thing to do to stretch yourself a bit. But ultimately, why I decided to leave was I was a little bit more experienced in the role that I got hired for, and unfortunately, like the push that I was trying to get to expand my role with the skills and experience that I brought, like wasn't being acknowledged in the way that I wanted it to. And then COVID hit. And so the opportunity for them to promote people was just not there. People were getting laid off. So it was just like a time where I felt like it was inevitable, like something was going to happen. And at the time, I saw a job posting for where I'm at now. And it felt like it was more of a match for me because I felt like I had learned what I needed to learn at the Atlantic on their team, and I wanted to apply what it meant to reach people and engage them in a way that felt more meaningful beyond just read our story and that's it. And so that's what I got to do. That's what I'm doing now at Change Consulting. I'm helping clients with their digital reach. I'm helping them with their content. I'm helping them learn how to engage people about the issues that they want people to care about. And so now I've been there for 5 years, so I think that was the right move.
Great. Well, you touched on this a little bit, but I'm hoping that you'll share just a little bit more, just in terms of advice that you would give, especially for our younger scholars on the call that are kind of weighing the difference between a brand name or something that's a little bit more aligned with their values. And, what advice do you have for navigating those decisions?
Yeah, it was really hard to leave the Atlantic because of that. Like, it was awesome to get sent free things, to get sent books to review. Like, people were willing to talk to me because I was at the Atlantic, even if I didn't have a really high role, right? Like, they just see the name and they automatically, whatever comes to mind for them, right? Gets projected onto you. And so there was a certain level of importance I felt then being at like being in DC and working at an establishment that people knew and respected. But at the same time, like I knew what I did there and I knew that I wanted to do more. And so I was like, what's really going to help advance you? Like just being associated with a place, but not getting to do what you want to do, or taking the risk to work at a place that maybe people don't know about, but knows what it is that you want to do and is giving you the chance to do that. So it was tough. It was a tough thing to make that decision, but ultimately I realized that like that's what I'm going to need to do to get to where I want to be. And it was funny, I think for several years, people still thought I was at the Atlantic. And if they had any issue with a story they read, they would like send it to me. And I'm like, I don't have anything to do with this. I'm not there anymore. And yeah, it was just funny because for a while, like I was just associated with it. Like everyone was like, oh yeah, and I have a friend who works there. And I was like, that guy's actually don't work there anymore. Or I'd have people who would message me and say, hey, I'm trying to get something published there. Like, is there a way that, and I was like, well, I do know some people who are there, so I'll see what I can do. So it's great that I have contacts there.
Yeah.
And of course, a lot of people move around in media. So they're often other outlets, but I do keep tabs on them. And so I will tell them like, hey, someone's trying to pitch you something. And that can help. So I still try and pay it forward in that way, even if I'm not in that world anymore.
Well, on the topic of contacts, do you have an example that you can share with us of a connection that you made, whether it was at a conference, a Flynn event, or through a mentor that led to an opportunity in your career and what that taught you about networking?
That's a good question. Yeah, I'm someone who like it really struggles with like formal networking, like walking into a large room and like trying to like identify who to talk to and what to say. But I definitely recommend to people that like you have to learn how to network as best as you can. And I usually recommend not like large networking, but more targeted, based off of like your issue area or your interests, because it's just easier to be more genuine and not come off as transactional.
Mm.
Um, so I would say, let's see, an opportunity that came my way because of that. I mean, I think networking with the Flynn's, like the events that they would put on for us on campus, because that just gave you an opportunity to have something to talk about with them. Um, and I do remember that there weren't a lot of Flynn's that were in my field. Um, I'm trying to think if anyone studied journalism that year. I don't think so. I think I was the only one. So that's what also made it hard for me. Like I remember I was the only one living in the downtown Phoenix campus and everybody was in Tempe. So that was hard. But I still tried to take advantage of like any of the events that they had, if they had them virtually or in person. And I think one of the biggest like connections that I made was I started an organization at ASU called Women as Hero, and it was a women's empowerment organization. And there were several Flynn's in the years after me that joined that. And so that was really great because we supported each other and worked together, putting on conferences and doing fundraisers and other type of volunteering events in the community. So I think that's been really helpful for me. And some of those Flynn's are in DC now. So I think that's been helpful just to have that professional connection now.
Mm. That's great. That's a good segue to the next kind of topic that I want to talk about with you. And I was hoping you could start by explaining what movement journalism is.
Yeah. So movement journalism is like kind of a newer term that has acknowledged that there's a need for people to be informed about what's happening on the ground in different social movements. And traditionally journalism tries to have like a very clear separation between, those who are writing about an issue and those who are in the issue. And movement journalism kind of blurs the line between that, and doesn't necessarily feel like it's a bias to be really deeply embedded and connected to the work that's being done and being able to translate that. And not saying that there are always both sides to an issue, like actually being very, very bold in observing what's happening and writing about it in that way to be able to serve the goals of the movement, which are, like liberation and justice. And so like when it's grounded in those values, like that is the way in which stories are written about and shared and distributed. And so that's definitely not something that existed when I went to journalism school at all. But it felt like that was what I was trying to do with my journalism. But at the time, that kind of storytelling would have been very easily put into opinion journalism. That's kind of always how it's been, like the editorial side, and then everything else, like the hard news. And so movement journalism is kind of challenging the way we think of mainstream media, and not seeing media as just reporting everything that everyone says and not really adding context, not ever saying, actually, what that person said is not quite right, or this person may be saying this, but like, let's break this down. So it's a really great time that we're in right now that there is more talk about what is the real role of journalism. Is it supposed to just be a mouthpiece, or is it actually supposed to be something that can be a form of service and a tool for justice?
So, can you tell us how you navigate ethical storytelling when frameworks differ so dramatically across contexts?
Yeah, it's tough. One of the things we've worked on for some of our clients is a guide to ethical storytelling, because now that I'm on the other side, we are often trying to figure out how to not overburden organizations, and asking, let's say, their grantees to tell stories so that foundations can use that, for press coverage. Because people get exhausted. I think it's tough as a journalist, like they have quick deadlines and they just need a story and they need to talk to someone. And they're not always thinking about the human side of it, is like, what are you extracting from that person? What happens to them after they tell their story? What are the negative consequences of that? And so we've thought a lot about how do we respect people's stories and their time. In journalism, you cannot pay people to be interviewed. But since we're not journalists, if we ask people for their time to talk to people or be a part of a storytelling campaign, we will often give them a stipend, because for some people, it means they need to take time off of work. They may need to travel to do the story. And so to not have them feel like, oh, we just need you because you're playing a role in a broader thing we're trying to do. Like we see them in their humanity. And so that's something we've been developing that I didn't know was possible, because in journalism, it was like, yeah, this is just a story. And if that person's not willing to be in it, then that's it. You move on and you find someone else. And so I really appreciate that we're kind of pushing the boundaries about, yeah, just how you treat people and their time.
That's great. What's one myth about social media you wish more mission-driven organizations understood?
That you can just make something go viral. It's just so difficult to explain to people that if they saw something that another organization did, that like they can do the same exact thing. Because just virality, like it can be studied, of course. There are patterns, there are things you can take away from trends. And we often encourage our clients that are a little bit more creative and risk taking to do that if it makes sense for their mission and like the people that they talk to. But oftentimes we tell them to just be authentic and have a purpose for what you share. Like, because people can tell if the content is just really self-congratulatory. So I think the best way, especially for organizations, is to offer a reason for people to engage with your work. Because most people don't care to follow nonprofits or foundations, right? Like that's not usually, people want to follow their friends. They may want to follow, I don't know, TV shows or like food accounts. Like that's what you want to do in your spare time. So what would make someone want to engage with like a political issue or a social issue is not that you talk about yourself and how great you are, but that you are showing them that you can be of service to them. And so I think I take that from my journalism background as well. Like what makes people want to read stories? Like it's something that feels useful or it's entertaining. And ideally, sometimes it can be both.
That's great. One more question that I have for you before we shift and open it up to our audience is, just knowing what you know about the behind the scenes with social media and just media in general. Do you have advice for an average consumer, things that we should be aware of or ways that we should think about consuming media more responsibly?
Yeah. Well, yeah, media literacy is very important. I think it's becoming even more important with AI, unfortunately. It's not just something our parents and grandparents are falling for, like everybody is falling for it with how rapidly it's becoming, yeah, just more sophisticated. And my company right now, we're exploring like what our AI policy is because we're already seeing clients using it. We can tell when they're writing things using ChatGPT. But there are, of course, use cases that I think are beneficial. Like we're exploring the idea of like how could we use it for note taking or like organization and structure. But there are so many ethical issues as well, right? Like environmentally, with plagiarism and copyright. And especially we talk a lot about like social justice and racial justice and like where is AI going to pull that from? How are they going to ethically talk about such nuanced issues? I don't think it's there yet. So that's something I would say to be really mindful of and like learn and understand, both from like content and like visuals and design, like what that can do. And then I say to also now broaden your perspective of what news is. It's not just, like TV and newspaper. Like a lot of people have really great newsletters and like Substacks are becoming very popular. So definitely highly recommend exploring that to get more news sources, especially diverse news sources. Right now, everything is very polarized. So try and read from different perspectives so you can have a better understanding of what's happening in the world, which can be hard to do, but we have to do it because we just have to know what everyone is saying.
It
I
looks like we've
see.
got one in the chat that we can
Yeah.
start with. How do you manage the digital overload and emotional fatigue that might come with the territory as a journalist striving for social impact?
That is a great question. We talk about it all the time. Honestly, taking breaks is really important because, yeah, the news never stops. And it's easy to feel responsible to know everything that's happening at all times, both for yourself, but also for our clients. So they feel on top of things, they understand what's happening, and they know how to navigate um, how complicated our world is getting. Especially, I feel like this year has felt like 10 years already. And so, yeah, I think just for our own mental health, and we remind our clients too, like, we say like at the end of the day, like we're not doing like brain surgery. So sometimes we're like, this can wait till tomorrow. Let's come back to this. And what I really love is that my boss is very mindful of like what topics certain people are writing about. And so for those who identify as Asian, when a lot of things were going around, like, AAPI hate, and having to work on issues and writing about that, we offer support. Like, hey, if you need a break, if you need support working on this, because for some people it's very personal, the work that they're writing about. And so I think just checking in with people is really important and checking in with yourself that if you need time to take a break, to do it, because otherwise it's very easy to burn out or become numb, and you don't want either of those. That's not helpful.
Yeah, great advice for every kind of stressful profession.
I'll go. Thank you so much. I also studied journalism and global studies at ASU, class of 2015. So we probably had similar overlap with professors and stuff. But I wanted to ask about sort of skills that you've learned in terms of like managing communication teams. Like in your position now, what do you feel like have been the greatest lessons in managing a communication team?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I love that you studied both of my majors because I feel like we're an anomaly. So yay. I'm glad I wasn't the only one who thought of those two together. But in terms of managing a communications team, Yeah, project management was something I've learned a lot about, and I've dabbled with like, should I get like a certification in that? This is always what I do. I'm like, do I need to get something for this? And it's like, maybe not. But I think project management has been really, really helpful. Work planning, to just bring everyone together, because we're more and more realizing that things should not be siloed. So even though like my team is focused on digital and content, which is just like a phrase to mean like anything like writing, blogs, websites. So we're a very like vague, constantly evolving team. Whereas we have like an earned media team, and they're the ones who do all the pitching and PR stuff. And then we have a research team, and they're the ones who do more of like branding and like, like values and visioning for clients. And we're realizing that we can't work in silos. Like a lot of the stuff needs to be more integrated. So that's something I've also learned in managing a team, is that like we can't just be like, well, I just am really comfortable in this side of things, because like media is changing so quickly. Like our earned media team will tell me like, yeah, like press releases are like not really a thing now, and like earned is not enough. Like it's really your owned channels. And I'm like, what does that mean then? So I'm like, are we not pitching? And they're like, sometimes it's not as like important to be in like everyone wants to be in the New York Times, right? But sometimes that's not necessarily the best thing for your client. Like sometimes it's really like if you make a really good social media video, like that sometimes can be more impactful and reach audiences. So that's also been interesting for me to learn about, is like bringing teams together constantly in collaboration. And we're a virtual team, so that's also been tricky. Like I'm in Virginia, I have some colleagues in Atlanta, and everyone else is in California. So we're having to learn how to like work together across time zones also, which is tough. But yeah, work planning, lots and lots of feedback, and humility has been really important for me in building this team.
We have another question in the chat. Go ahead.
I'll chime in. So hi, Nesima. I really enjoyed learning from you this past hour. I'm Jake Batzel. I'm a journalism professor at SMU in Dallas, and I run a business journalism program here. And we have a lot of internship programs, including a running program at the Dallas Morning News. And one of the slots is always for the audience team. And kind of counterintuitively, a lot of students seem hesitant to take that role, because for a couple of reasons. I think one might be kind of what you're describing about maybe Gen X or Boomer editors saying like, go make something viral, or something, with a magic secret sauce. But I think also some of their peers in corporate settings have, where they were kind of the social media intern, were kind of robotically churning things out, and didn't feel like they were really fulfilling their potential. But I think what you're talking about, and kind of, I love how you refer to an audience team as like the community journalists of the newsroom. Is there are ways to really make the most of working on the audience team and doing social media for an internship. So just wondering if you have any advice, not just for my students, but any younger scholars listening or watching, about how to best take advantage of a behind the scenes kind of social media internship role, make the most of it, and also to document their work and sell themselves. Like I'm sure that growing the Atlantic's Insta account by 200% is a bullet point on your resume, or has been in the past. But any advice for the skeptical student who may be a little hesitant to take a social media internship?
Yeah, I love that. So I did not know what audience engagement was. I actually was referred to that because a friend of mine knew someone who was a reporter at the Center for Public Integrity. So as I was job hunting, and she's like, we have this new role. It's not quite a reporter role. I don't really know what it does. It's called an audience engagement editor. But like, if you're interested, just let me know and I can put your name in. And as I read the description of it, I was like, oh, this is really interesting. Like, I'm not necessarily writing articles, but I am essentially like a community journalist. I am helping advocate for the reader and helping make the journalism that these reporters are working on actually reach them and do something, right, and measure the value of it. So yes, it did obviously involve social media, involved their email newsletter and their website. And because they were a nonprofit, it also involved communicating with donors and helping them realize here's where your money is going, and these are the latest stories we've put out. But I really loved that there were a couple conferences and groups that I was became a part of at that time that really showed me that this was more than just doing a bunch of social media, there was like a tracker we had, an impact tracker. So we were noting that like from when a story was published, like did a law get changed? Did people confirm that they learned something new? Like there were all these ways that I was like, oh, these are not just stories that you just read and then move on. Like these can actually have real world impact. And so I was helping them experiment too with some funding about how they could be more in touch with their readers. And I think it's easier with something like investigative journalism. It's harder sometimes with like daily news because it just things move so fast. But even having like a community driven series of like people asking you questions, and then there's like a set team of journalists who will report on that and like explain things. Like I just loved that. I thought that was so helpful, and it can give editors and writers a check of like, are you establishing what's important? Like who's setting the agenda? Is it you? Or is it the readers? And like, if you really want them to pay for what you're writing, if they feel like you're actually in conversation with them, if you're willing to share the process of how you wrote that story, why you made the choices you did, like that makes people feel connected to you and you're like a real person. Because I think we've moved away from now people feeling like journalists are a part of their community, and instead they're just in some far off place, and it's very easy to criticize them. It's very easy to like not trust them. So like, what do we do to like bridge that gap? And like shorten the distance between a reader and the journalist, because journalists are supposed to be just everyday people, right? Like they live in your community and they're writing and reporting for you. And so that's what I loved about audience engagement. And I think if I was to go back into journalism, I think I would still go back to that area. I still love writing articles, but there's just something I learned from stumbling into audience engagement when it's not just focused on social media. I will put that as a caveat, but newsrooms that actually understand the potential for audience engagement, it's like magical. I really, really enjoyed the opportunity to be a part of those teams.
Question about who is a journalist that you really look up to?
That is a great question. It's funny because I feel like the journalists that I initially looked up to, it's like over time, unfortunately, disappointed me based off of their reporting on certain issues and things that have come up in ethical situations. So I'm always very careful to say who I admire as a journalist. But right now, I'll say I'm fascinated by Mehdi Hassan, who just started his own media company a year ago called Zateo. And he's more on the progressive side and more like the movement journalism side. But I really appreciate that his approach to journalism is more about accountability, and it's a little bit bolder than a lot of the traditional journalists that I think a lot of us grew up following and reading. And he's also very like digitally forward, which I think is what you need if you want people to read and care about the issues. And so yeah, I admire him and the work that he's doing to just shake things up and how journalism works.
Love your delicate navigation of that answer.
Yeah, because you never know, that answer will then be changed the next day and you're like, never mind.
So you've got another question in the chat. How did you get over writing block? And more broadly, what motivated you to enter the writing space? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. I think what helps is you don't have time for writer's block in journalism and communication, because things just got to move. And so often, if I'm like too in my head, I try and move it to a space where someone else can connect and read what I'm working on, or I can talk through it. Because often it's like you getting in your own way. But I often feel like sometimes setting something aside, giving it a break, taking a walk, reading something that inspires you. One of the things I did during COVID was I went through this book called The Artist's Way. I think that's the correct name for it. But it basically was a way to like also help you reimagine your creativity and find different ways for you to like explore what it is you want to do and what are the blocks that are there. And sometimes they are mental and emotional or spiritual. And it helps you push through that with practices like morning pages, which is like, it forces you every day when you wake up, you just have to write 2 pages, and it can be about anything and you're not supposed to overthink it, and you just write it. And then the other thing they recommend is like artist dates or like self dates, where you just go and you like I'm going to go to a museum, or I'm going to do that, like something where you like honor yourself and the time that you need to be creative. And so those are things that really helped me. I haven't kept up with the morning pages, unfortunately, and I think that's why I'm regressing and I'm feeling the writer's block coming up. And so I'm going to remind myself, thank you, that I need to get back to that, because often it's just like the motion and the action of creating that can help you push through.
Do you have any advice for taking career risks?
That is a good question. I think it's like weighing your tolerance for risk at any point. Like, I think there are certain times where if the decision you're making spectacularly fails, like, but you believe in yourself to recover from it, and there's not really that much that is depending on that success, then make the bigger risk. And if you're at a point in your life where like actually there are more consequences, then keep that in mind. I think it's easier to do often when you're younger and you don't have dependents and things like that, or someone's funding the decision you're making. So it's okay. But I love pros and cons lists. That's like very traditional, but I used to always just pro con every decision that I made. And also seeing every decision that like, even if it doesn't go the way that you want, knowing that there's something you can learn from it. Like once you see it in that way, it kind of reduces the pressure. So like for me, moving to the Atlantic, it was like, it's a lower position. I got paid less. So that's like something not a lot of people knew. Like I basically took a step back in my career to be at the Atlantic. But I said what was the upside was I'm going to be at a larger company with name recognition. I'm going to learn really quickly and fast from a company that's very technologically savvy and forward. And I was willing to be like, okay, I'm going to just budget better so that I can live off of a lower salary. So things like that, I think just knowing like yourself and like what you're willing to deal with when you make sacrifices. And then, when I jumped to this company, like it's a small business, so I was nervous about that. It was someone who used to be a journalist, then went into communications and then started her own team. So I was like, oh my God, can I trust this? Like, what if her company just like goes under, next year? Like that could have easily happened. But I said, okay, but like, what are the upsides of me going here? Like, what you're learning to do here as a consultant, like you could then go off and do on your own. And also you have all these other companies on your resume, so you can still go back to a traditional company. So like, really, what are you worried about here? It's just, sometimes I think we obsess over every decision we make being perfect. And I don't think that exists. There's so many decisions that I was terrified to make. And if I only did the ones that I felt good about, like I wouldn't be where I'm at now. So I had to work through that myself. So I can relate. I feel that so much. But now, after all these years, I'm like, you can't tell sometimes if is it a bad decision or is it your anxiety? Like, and a lot of times it's just our own anxiety. So keeping that in mind.
Obsessing over decisions sounds like a very Flynn, a trait we see through
It really is.
scholars.
Yeah, it is, unfortunately. But that means also you have a great group of people to come to go and talk about, because then you feel like you're not alone.
Yeah. Okay, so you've got another question in the chat. You mentioned recognizing getting to a point at the Atlantic where it was clear that the promotion, career advancement you had worked for wasn't going to be on the table for a while. How did you know you were in that moment?
Yeah, okay. So I mean, I think sometimes you have to check if it's an internal thing where you really think it's not going anywhere or it actually isn't going anywhere. So I made sure first, like, did I exhaust all of my options? Like, I was told that the culture was, if you want to write a story, if you want to do this, if you want to do that, we welcome that from anyone, no matter what your title is or your role. So I was like, okay, so if that's true, let me see what it looks like to actually then put forth my ideas and my thoughts and see what happens. And so I did that not just once or not just twice, because I feel like that's also like, okay, did you really try? Like I did that a number of times with different avenues, and still wasn't getting where I was going. And I would keep seeking feedback and, understand of why wasn't that working? Like, why was that not received well? And was not getting very clear responses about why it wasn't happening. And then then I looked at like the facts of like, okay, what opportunities are there? Like, what would it really look like to grow? Is there like a clear structure for it? And if there is, are they following it? If there's not, can I suggest something and see what happens? So I tried to like do it in a more logical way, because when it's purely emotional, it's very easy to not be honest about your situation, right? And like prematurely then leave when it's like, oh, did you try to make it work? Because you could face those same issues again in another place. And I really was like, didn't want that to happen. I was like, I really want to make sure I understand, like, if I'm just not working as hard as I should be, or if I'm like not getting what this place needs or what they're asking of me, then, am I going to have wasted the opportunity? So I tried to do that first. And then I also just had to check in with myself and be like honest with like, are you waking up still wanting to do this work? And once it gets to a point where you're like, ugh, it's feeling like a drag, that's also kind of when you know that it's probably the right time for you to leave. So you leave on a good note. You don't want to leave when people are like, they can tell like you're not doing your best work. So that's always what I wanted to avoid, was like, if it's getting to the point where I am not delivering my best because I'm just not, my heart is not in it, I want to have an exit route ideally.
No, great advice, I think, regardless of the field that you're in. So I thank you for that question, Mia. To wrap up, I'd really like to just ask what's next on your bucket list, either, professionally or personally, that you'd like to share.
Ooh, that's a great question. Yeah, I think it's always very easy once you work for so long to be like, okay, so what's next? Like, like you're always so used to as a student having like another milestone. So I've been trying to think about that for myself, like what are things to look forward to? One of the things I've gotten away from just because of how busy work and school is like my creative writing. I really want to get back into that. I used to do a lot of poetry. I've been wanting to like work on like a poetry collection, so I'd like to work on that. I also really want to write a children's book, so I have a lot of ideas floating around. So they're not journalism or communications related, but I think I need that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to exploring that, and then I'm also trying to get in touch with other types of creativity, and so I like picked up a bunch of like watercolor painting supplies. I don't know if I'm going to be any good at it, but I'm looking forward to doing something where I don't have a screen and I'm not writing. Like I just feel like I need another way to get expression out there. And I've noticed that when I do that, it does help me in other areas. So that's what I have on my to-do list.